Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Radical Product Thinking Book Launch event. This is the event where we're going to have Radhika Dutt joining Productized to officially launch her new book. And we're super happy because in this new book, you'll find out what drove Radhika to write her story and lots of what she thinks is an important narrative to be told about the way she sees radical product thinking and why her way of thinking is so inspiring and compelling. Um, our mission at Productize is also to inspire people to impactful action. And my name is André Marquet, and I'll be your host here for this today's session. So yeah, I think we're kind of starting. So we're still admitting people to the session. Let's kind of play a little game, shall we? So I'm going to ask my colleague Teresa to share on the chat this link, or you can just scan this QR code if you prefer. And we're going to see where people are coming from, right? We have Arshnur with us joining in. Welcome. Welcome, João. Bernardino, welcome, Daniel. Welcome, Mihai. Thank you guys for joining today's session. And let's see where people are joining us from. Yeah. So as you scan the code or as you go to the link that Teresa just shared on the chat, you'll get to see this query. And as you answer this little query, it's just your name and your location. If you don't want to write location, the system will kind of figure it out for you. You'll start to pop it out here in the map. So we have Mihai. All right. So Mihai is in Canary Islands. Is that so, Mihai? Are you really taking it off at Canary Island? I'm so envy.
Yes, I am. I just got there.
All right, nice. We have João from Lisbon and a bunch of other people from Lisbon. I think there's like so many people that they're just on top of each other. Teresa, Andrea, Daniel. I don't know if Arshnur wants to say where she's coming in from California. Glass of wine. Okay. So maybe she's a wine country right now. Okay, so as people will start popping in the session, we might come back to this map. Otherwise, this is in the chat, so I guess people will just be able to join as we go. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about Productized. At Productized, we seek to contribute to the relationship between people and their organizations to build better products. I think at the end, that's really what we're trying to do. Very broad message, but at the end of the day, this means that since 2015, we have been gathering in Lisbon, in Portugal, the best product pros in the world, or virtually, like we're doing it today. We are, we're not announcing anything, but 2022 seems to be the comeback year. So hopefully we'll be back in IRL into 2022, and hopefully we have something to announce. To have fellows from leading companies and product people joining in person again. So while you can't do that right now, you can join our immersive hands-on experiences with workshops and talks and training programs at our Productized Academy, which is an online platform which we have just launched. It's like a private curated LinkedIn, but without the self promotion. So you can take this opportunity to review all the master classes, including Radhika's masterclass there, the events, the courses, discuss with your with your fellow product people there, because there's an open directory where you can see the people that is inside of each group, inside the platform, inside the community, and be aware of upcoming content and events. So just join this new platform on MyT via this link, or the link that Kat just shared on the chat. So it's really painless, at least for the moment, and it's free. We're going to make it a private paid community, invitation only until the end of the year. But we're giving the chance to our legacy community, or people that are already inside the community, to join for free until the end of the year. And starting January, this is going to be a paid community. So join while it's still free. So another course that it's upcoming just before we start and kickstart the event is our digital product management 7-week course. It's starting with Católica Lisbon University, and it's starting November 10th, 2021. Has a duration of 7 weeks. So that's like 45 hours over 14 sessions. So you have 2 sessions per week. And it's with some of the best faculty in the product space in Portugal, and definitely some gems, including today's session, which is part of that, in essence, that lineup that we're building up towards the course. It's going to be taught for the first time in Portuguese, so you don't need to be a proficient English speaker to take advantage of that course. And yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to dive into product, especially if you're still new to the profession. So today's session is really about Radhika Dutt. And Radhika, let me just give a brief intro on Radhika's bio, and before we actually start. So Radhika, she's an entrepreneur and she's a product leader. She has participated in 4 acquisitions as a result of the products she built. And 2 of these companies were actually companies she founded herself. So she currently advises organizations from high-tech startups to government agencies on product thinking and vision leadership. She's the author of Radical Product Thinking. That's the book I have here with me today, and I guess some of you guys should have already got it by now on your desks. And yeah, she just published the book. The book just came out, and the book gives readers a systematic approach for building successful products that bring about the change we want to see in the world. Let me just say that Radhika graduated from the MIT, and she has also a master's in mechanical and electrical engineer. And she speaks 9 languages while learning her 10th, which is amazing. So Radhika, before we actually start, let me remind people that we have a giveaway, which is super nice from you. A 60-minute free consulting session with Radhika Dutt. So you can, do a free consultation and understand how to craft a vision and a more compelling story for your company, startup, project, idea, you name it. So stay until the end so you can compete on the raffle. And with no further ado, let me actually ask Radhika here on our virtual stage. Hi, Radhika. Welcome. Hope you're doing well.
Thank you. And I'm so excited to do this with you.
Thank you so much. It's so nice from you to be available at this time of the day. And I know that in the US it's still early. So hope you're well. And before we actually start, let me just ask you, I think that's kind of a curiosity of mine and maybe some people here in the audience. What drove you to write the book, and what can you tell us really about this labor of love, which is writing a book and having it now being shipped? So many people are enjoying the book, including myself. Tell us a little bit more about it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with, some of the experiences that led me to write the book. I think one of the hardest things about publishing is it's hard to publish a book. If fundraising is hard, right? Like publishing takes it to a whole new level. But what really led me to want to write this book was the fact that, having been an entrepreneur, I had made so many mistakes along the way. And I felt like over the 20-year career that I've had, I've really had to learn kind of how to build vision-driven products. And it's really hard to be successful as an entrepreneur because, you keep having to learn how to translate your vision into everyday action. And it's so easy to make a mistake along the way. Somewhere between the vision all the way to action, there's often a break in the chain. And that's where we see product diseases. And my own experience has been that, I've caught so many product diseases along the way. In fact, my first startup right out of school, we were still in our dorm rooms at the time. And we started a company that we call Lobby 7. And our vision was to revolutionize wireless, right? This was back in 2000. And I write about that in the book, but that was the first experience I had with a product disease. I had caught hero syndrome, where it was all about, go big or go home, scale fast. And so, this was the first experience with product diseases. And, over time, I avoided that product disease to catch another one, for example. And over the span of 20 years, I had really learned a lot of how to build vision-driven products using intuition. But I found that, even when I worked in other companies, I kept seeing the same pattern of product diseases, whether I worked in, broadcast, media and entertainment, telecom, advertising, government even. It didn't matter which industry or size of company. I kept seeing the same pattern of diseases. And that's what drove me to write this book. It was a burning question saying, is it that there are just a few leaders who can build visionary products, or, can each of us build visionary products and learn how to do that systematically?
All right. I think you also have a little presentation that you have prepared for us. Is that correct?
Yes, I do indeed.
Great. So, if we can see it, by all means, I'm super curious to see what we have prepared, which is, I guess, a small, if I understood right, it's a set of stories that are also told, at least partially, or in a more extensive way in the book, correct?
Exactly. I've told some of these stories, but here in this conversation, I think you get a deeper look into some of these stories and pictures, which always, help as well in adding some color to the story.
All right, let's go. We are seeing your presentation correctly, so let's do it.
Excellent. Okay, so let's start this with an exercise, right? In chat, just feel free to share the first name of a visionary that comes to mind, someone who has had an impact on this world. Just don't be shy. Just feel free to throw out the first name that comes to mind.
So here on the chat, or shall we just voice the names?
Yeah, actually just voice them. Go for it. Feel free to unmute yourself.
All right, Grace Lee Boggs. That's Elon Musk. That's Mihai. I'm wondering, Steve Jobs, Paul Gaudencio. Jeff Bezos, Arsh Noor.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing, right? And I think what we see is a pattern. This is, oh, great. I love the fact that we're also thinking about people from other parts of the world. Galileo. Great. So I love the fact that we have all these different names popping up, right? But here's a pattern that I want to share that I'm seeing, right? Whether it's Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Gandhi, all of these names, it feels like there's this set of just rare visionary leaders that we feel like, those are the kind of people who create change in the world. And by the way, very often, these leaders seem to be mostly white and mostly male. That's kind of how we think about visionaries. And I really wanted to challenge this view because, society really teaches us that our impact has to be heroic so that, that's when you get recognized as a visionary. We've really learned that, that's what it means to be a visionary. You have to be one of these rare set of leaders. And the problem with that view, right, is that the rate at which we change the world ends up being this very small trickle. Instead, if each of us could really create change in the world very systematically, this is the rate at which we could really change the world. But unfortunately, right, until now, what has happened is the methodologies or business books, they've really emphasized using speed and trial and error to be able to create change, right? We haven't really learned a methodology about how can each of us be visionaries. We haven't learned the step-by-step process of how do you build change very systematically. And that was what I felt was missing in the world, right? What we've learned in terms of the mantras for product management or building products, for scaling companies, it's these main ideas. It's the idea of build, test, learn, scale. Just try things in the market, see what works. Fail fast, learn fast. Maybe you have to move fast and break things along the way. But above all, right, what we've learned is you have to iterate quickly. And here's the problem with iterating quickly. Iterating fast, it's like having a fast car. It's wonderful to have a McLaren. It's wonderful to have a Ferrari. This is not a criticism of going fast. But the reality is, speed alone is not enough. It's good to have speed in execution, but when we step back for a moment, right, we realize that a fast car is only really useful when you know where you're going. Because when you only have speed, speed can look like this, where you just have arrows pointing all different directions. What really matters is direction, right? Because when we just have all of us pointing in different directions, but moving fast, what we catch is what I call product diseases. And so here, I want to share with you some of the product diseases that I've seen. And, let's do a checkup where feel free to share if you've seen some of these product diseases, right? The first one that I told you about that I'd caught was hero syndrome. But this is so common in startups where, especially with venture-funded startups, we often confuse raising funding with success, right? You often see startups that have raised millions and millions. And we often think that that's what success means for a startup. Very often, it's all about let's scale fast, go big or go home. And that's hero syndrome. Obsessive sales disorder is where, this is one that I've contributed to myself. This is where, our salesperson comes to us and says, if you just add this one custom feature, we can even win this big mega client. And so we say, that sounds mostly harmless. Let's do it. And pretty soon, your entire roadmap is driven by just features that you have to make good on for your customers that you've promised, right? We often think that being customer-centric is being lean and agile and giving customers what they want. And that ends up leading to obsessive sales disorder. So when we're just focused on speed by being lean and agile, we often catch this disease. This next one is pivotitis, right? And if you're a startup, you almost always have caught pivotitis. And I can share one example of a startup where I'd caught pivotitis. Our startup was trying to be the next Visa of the world. And at the time I was heading up marketing. And, we started off trying to be this next Visa, but we realized that's a really hard problem to solve because you have to win both merchants and you have to acquire consumers as well. So we said, that's really hard. We're going to pivot. So we pivoted to being a credit solutions company for merchants. But that was eventually, before then, we also tried to be a loyalty solutions provider for merchants. And, as the head of marketing, I was creating brochures and a website. And honestly, I just didn't even know what to write in our brochures anymore. Like, what am I asking people to sign up for? Right? That's a classic case of pivotitis. when you feel like you're going after that next shiny object. And one more disease I'll talk about is narcissist complex. This is one where, we're often looking inwards. We're thinking about what our business needs, our own goals for the business. And I think the worst case of narcissist complex that I've come across is, the head of a hospital group was saying, for us to be successful, we need patients to come back often, right? In fact, we forget kind of in focusing on our own goals, what it actually means for our users. And in this case, it meant that they had to be sick all the time. So that's narcissist complex. But these are just a few of the 7 diseases that I talk about in the book, and these diseases are so common, it really doesn't matter what industry you're in. It's just really easy to catch them. These diseases, they happen when we're being iteration led, when our iterations are not driven by a really clear vision and strategy, which is basically when we have a fast car, but we're not really clear about where we're going and how to get there. And so, what we really need is not just speed, but we need direction to our speed. And as we know from high school physics, right, this is where if you have speed plus direction, that's when you have velocity. So we're all pointing in the right direction. And this is how we can actually create change, build better products. And so radical product thinking is about a methodology so that we can build these world-changing products. And the book really gives organizations a very step-by-step and practical approach for building these world-changing products. What I mean by this step-by-step practical approach is that, instead of just being iteration-led and where we say, let's just try things in the market and see what works, we take this systematic approach to engineering change, which means starting with a really clear vision for what's the end state we want to create, then translating it into a strategy, then into a set of priorities that reflect our vision and strategy in our execution. Then finally, execution measurement, where we're measuring what matters. And then we can apply all of these ideas also in engineering the culture that we want in our organization. But most importantly, right, all of these steps in radical product thinking, they're designed as tools so that we can communicate with our teams and bring everyone with us on the journey. And I want to give you a flavor for this, right? Because all of these are words that we've heard before. We've heard that we need a vision, but if we think about, just what we've learned about what a vision is, the reason this is called radical product thinking is because these are radical ideas. I want to challenge everything that we've learned in terms of conventional wisdom. The first thing that we've learned about a good vision, right, is that a good vision has to be a BHAG. Like if you've ever raised funding, the VC normally asks you, so what's your big, hairy, audacious goal? And that's the first thing we have to kind of discard in terms of conventional wisdom that we've learned. A vision does not have to be a big, hairy, audacious goal. In fact, what happens often is we have big, hairy, audacious goals like this. Here's the vision statement of a public company. It says, contributing to human progress by empowering people to express themselves, right? When you have a vision like this, it just turns out that anything fits against this vision, right? And in fact, I could use this vision to describe my kid's piano teacher. She is empowering my kids to express themselves and therefore contributing to human progress. So it could be the vision for my kid's piano teacher, but this could also be the vision for a company that's making Post-it notes because, we use Post-it notes to let people express themselves in meetings. Whether you're making, whether you're teaching piano or making Post-it notes, if this vision fits, then it's not acting like a good North Star. It's not acting like a filter where you can actually hold up your vision against this and say, should I do this or not? The answer to everything, right, is a yes. And in fact, having such a broad vision is often the root of so many product diseases. I mentioned hero syndrome in my very first startup. Our vision I mentioned to you was, revolutionizing wireless. So often we see vision statements that start like this, to disrupt or to empower, to be the leader in blah, blah, right? So instead of this being a vision, the radical approach to a vision is being really detailed about what is a good vision. A radical vision really states what's the problem you want to solve and how are you going to solve it? And that means you have to answer 5 questions that are really deep and profound questions to answer. It's the who, what, why, when, and how questions. So the first one is, whose world are you setting out to change? What does their world look like? Meaning, what exactly is their problem? The third question is probably the most important one to me, which is, why does that world need changing? Meaning, why is the status quo completely unacceptable? Because if it's not unacceptable, maybe there's no reason for your product to exist. Then finally, we can say, when will you know that you've arrived? Meaning, what does the world look like when you can say mission accomplished? And then finally, this is where we can talk about our technology or our approach. How are you going to bring about this world? Right? And what I've found is, whenever we even know that we have to answer this who, what, why, when, how questions, the problem is when you start with a blank sheet of paper, you end up playing vision bingo. So unless you want to play vision bingo as a team and end up with the same vision that you started with, what you really need is a different approach, a more radical approach. And that's why the radical vision worksheet has this fill in the blank statement, so that you're not stuck in the words on, just finding the right words to express yourself. Instead, you're focusing on the concepts. And so here's what that radical vision statement would sound like, right? Using this fill in the blank statement. And rather than I'll show you an example of this in action. And we'll do that as part of an example, because what I really want to do now is, now that I've given you a flavor for why these are some radical ideas that challenge conventional wisdom, I really want to stretch our thinking in terms of product. I want to stretch our thinking in terms of, what does it mean to build a world-changing product? And the way I want to do this is using the example of an organization that makes papadums. Now, if you're familiar with papadums, they're the lentil crackers that you eat in Indian restaurants. And so the thing that you don't know probably is that there's one organization that has 60% market share in papadums. And this organization has revenues of over $200 million and is owned by 45,000 women who are all equal partners in this organization. So I want to tell you a little bit about, how this organization is so vision-driven, and kind of how they've created this product that now has 60% market share. It was founded in 1959 by 7 women, right? And these women, they came together because they lived in a really patriarchal society and they wanted to earn a dignified living. They just didn't want to be dependent on their husbands. And what they wanted was, to be able to contribute to the household income and have a say in household spending so that they could educate their kids. But the problem was they were all, semi-literate. They didn't have good job prospects because, they barely were literate. And so their main skill that they felt that they had was cooking. So they realized that they could make papadums, because papadums are one thing that are really, they're tasty. Every family likes to have papadums at home, except papadums are such a pain to make. And so they felt like they could use their skills to make papadums and sell those to stores. So that was the market need that they found. And so these 7 women got together on their building's terrace and they started rolling papadums and drying them. And then what they decided, though, was that they were never going to take charity. They borrowed the equivalent of $150 today. And they started rolling these papadums and they started selling them to shops. And very soon, right, this group grew from 7 to 25. Over the span of a year, they became 300 women who no longer fit on the building's terrace. So today, they have a whole setup, right, to be able to continue doing this. And what's amazing is they have 45,000 women who are all part of this, who all share in profits and losses equally, because they never want to take charity, because they really want to have a dignified living. So they have this whole operational setup there where they have buses that drive all these member sisters, meaning all these women who are co-owners. They drive these member sisters to centers where they pick up the dough that needs to be rolled. Then the member sisters go back home, they roll the papadums, dry them out. The next day, these buses pick them up, and then they drop off the papadums that they've rolled. They get paid for what they rolled, and they pick up new dough to go roll the next day. And the cycle continues, right? So it's an incredible operational setup that is very successful. And, it's been going for like 60 years. So you wonder, okay, how did this happen, right? And how can 45,000 women be equal partners in something and it's actually still running well? It all started with a very clear vision. And it's a vision for a product that was their mechanism for creating the change that they wanted to see in the world. So the change that they wanted to see, right, was they wanted to give financial independence to women and allow them a way of earning a dignified living. Papadums were just their product, their mechanism for bringing about that change. And that's one of the key lessons, right? Your product is your mechanism to create change that you want to see. So that was the product, the papadums. So if we think about what was their vision, we can write it out in a radical vision statement. Today, when women from poor households who don't have too much of an education want to run the household and educate their kids, they have to depend on their husband's income and therefore cannot influence spending. This is unacceptable because it limits their children's educational prospects and it repeats the cycle of poverty. We envision a world where women become self-sufficient and this leads to their socioeconomic development. We're bringing about this world through high-quality papadums and later other consumer goods, but without ever taking charity. Right? And so what is important is Lijit's vision isn't just a little slogan. We often confuse having a tagline or a slogan, but their vision is so deeply internalized. Every woman in that organization really deeply knows that vision, and that's really what their vision is about. So once you've defined your vision, right, that's only the first step. You really have to translate that into every element of your product. And this is what's amazing to me in Lijit's case. Every aspect of their product, right? The fact that all of their papadums are made by hand instead of being automated in factories, it's all based on a very clear vision. So that vision comes true because of a strategy. And here's their strategy. The easy to remember mnemonic for a good strategy is radical, or RDCL, which is thinking about the real pain points. In this case, we have to ask the question, what do these women need for a dignified living? Then we say, what's the design? Meaning, what's the solution? How do you deliver on these capabilities? Meaning, what's the special sauce that allows you to power that design? And then finally, logistics, which is how do you actually bring the solution to customers? So in terms of real pain points, right? These women, they had a very strong work ethic, but they just didn't have education. The other real pain point was they were the primary caregivers in the family. And that meant that they really couldn't leave home for very long, right? So they couldn't go work in factories. They had to work from home. So in terms of the design, that meant that this whole Lijit solution of rolling papadums that had to be done at home. The other part of the solution was for these women to be able to really get through the patriarchy and for them to be able to work, they had to earn everyday wages. They had to be able to share in profits equally and actually bring home a living, right? So that they could actually leave home and go work. In terms of capabilities, what this meant was, right, because women had to show earnings every day and be able to influence household spending, in terms of capabilities, one of the special things about Lijit and how their business model is structured is they do not give or take credit. Every day when they sell, when Lijit, distributes papadums to stores, they're paid on an everyday basis. Like whenever they distribute, they get money. They do not give credit. They do not take credit. This means they can pay women every day. The other thing, right, in terms of capabilities and the special sauce is think about the fact that there are 45,000 women who share in profits equally. They had to create a whole new mindset in people. Like it wasn't a mindset about maximizing individual wealth. It was about maximizing group earnings. And then finally, in terms of logistics, right, think about the fact that Lijit is known for its quality, but it's 45,000 women who are all rolling papadums at home. Quality control would be a nightmare. And so one of the things about logistics was being able to create this decentralized control and being able to do decentralized quality control. So that was their radical strategy, right? But very often in organizations, you have a vision and a strategy, but it doesn't show up in decisions. So this is where prioritization comes in. And that means balancing the long term against the short term. So when you want to actually do this prioritization and find the right balance, what I found is it's really helpful to actually define explicitly your X and Y axis. Things that are good for the vision and it helps you survive in the short term, that's of course ideal. But very often you have to invest in the vision, which is where you have to do things that are good for the vision, but it may not help you in the short term. If you don't ever invest in the vision, you're always being short-term driven. And occasionally you have to take on vision debt. Maybe this is not good for the vision, but it's helping you survive in the short term. But you have to do that really carefully, right? Very occasionally. And so if we think about Lijit and how they actually spread their features across this, taking a loan, they didn't want to take a loan, right? The whole idea was to be financially independent, but taking a loan was vision debt. They kind of had to start this way. But to counter that, what they did was in the future, they decided they would share profits and losses equally. They didn't know that they were going to make a profit, right? It could have been a loss. So they were investing in the vision by doing that. This feature of not giving or taking credit, it's both helpful for their survival and it's right for the vision. So that was an ideal feature. And then finally, over the years, Lijit has been investing in educating women, giving them financial literacy. All of that is investing in the vision. So they've continued to invest in the vision. And then finally, right, when you're being vision driven, you have to measure what matters. So if I think about how Lijit measures success, all these popular metrics such as revenues, market share, all of that is important, but it's not how Lijit measures success. Lijit's one metric by which they measure success, it's the number of women to whom they give financial independence. And, of course, if their market share drops or if their revenues drop, they're not going to make as many women financially independent. So again, those metrics are all important, but the one metric that for them indicates success is the number of women to whom they give financial independence. So, this example of Lijit really shows you that your radical product is an improvable mechanism for engineering the change that you envision, right? And that's how they've been able to give financial independence to 45,000 women. So the example that I showed you so far, right? This was of Lijit where they were founders of a company. But what if you're not founding a company? What if you're working in an organization? How can we be visionaries in our work? And to illustrate that, I want to use the example of Margaret Hamilton. Now, most of us, may not have heard of Margaret Hamilton, but Margaret Hamilton happens to be the one who, she coined the term software engineering. She was the one who saved the moon landing. In fact, 3 minutes before the moon landing happened, there was an error on board. And it turned out that an astronaut had made a mistake. The computer was crashing because it was overloaded by some data. And so Margaret's code really helped the computer recover from it. She had engineered her code so that when this computer was overwhelmed in terms of memory overload, that it would discard all of this data and just focus on a set of a prioritized task list that was important for landing this module. Even in today's day and age, this would be considered impressive feat of engineering, right? And so my question, I interviewed Margaret Hamilton for the book, and I asked her, how did you think of this back in the 60s when software engineering was not even a thing? And her answer goes to the vision, but it wasn't NASA's vision, right? NASA's vision was to put man on the moon. But honestly, that is kind of useless for a software engineer. That vision is just very broad. So Margaret had a vision for her work, and her vision for her work was that she wanted to build ultra reliable software that could recover from every possible error in the process of putting man on the moon. So she had a vision for her work. And so then, she translated that into a set of priorities. And this is what that meant for her, right? In terms of investing in the vision, here's an example of how she invested in the vision. There was one day in lab where her daughter was playing with the simulator, and her daughter crashed the simulator by pressing two buttons, P0 and P1. And Margaret Hamilton looked at that and she said, oh my God, if my daughter can crash the system, one of the astronauts could do the same. So she pushed NASA to say, we have to fix this. Please allow me to add a fix to this. But NASA said, really, you're being a bit too obsessive about error fixing. We will train the astronauts. Astronauts are going to be trained to be perfect. They will not make the same mistake. And so they wrote in the manual saying, do not press P0 and P1 at the same time. And of course, as we know, putting instructions in the manual is the end of all problems in software, right? Well, of course, there you go. They were traveling between here and the moon, and halfway in between, Jim Lowell, who was an astronaut, accidentally pressed P0 and P1 at the same time, and the system crashed. And basically, it led to their ship being just stuck in space, and they lost all navigational data. And so they had to incur some vision debt, where Margaret and other colleagues had to work urgently to fix this error and upload navigation data. But that led NASA to do something in the ideal quadrant, which is they realized that her vision for building ultra-reliable software and recovering from every possible error was so important. And from then on, they gave her carte blanche in terms of implementing her approach to error correction on all systems. So that was how she translated, vision into action. Maybe one last thing that I want to talk about is, how can you apply these ideas anywhere? Because this is not just about applying these ideas if you're a founder or if you're, working for a company. You can create change through anything, including activism, your personal life, wherever you see the need for it. And the example I want to give you is one that truly was deeply meaningful and so inspiring for me. And that's the example of Claudette Colvin. Most of us have never heard of Claudette Colvin, and history has forgotten her, but her role was so important in the civil rights movement. She was arrested at age 15 in Alabama for defying the bus segregation laws. And by the way, this was 9 months before Rosa Parks, but we all know Rosa Parks as the icon of the civil rights movement in the US. But Claudette Colvin, she didn't give up her seat on the bus. And I asked Claudette, I was just so honored to interview her. I asked her, you weren't even an adult. You knew the risks of what you were doing. How did you refuse to give up your seat, given everything you knew? And her answer to me was really centered in the vision. What she said was, I wanted a world where we could all partake in that same American dream. And she was tired of adults complaining about it, but then not doing anything about it. And so driven by this vision, she actually did something about it. It affected her everyday actions, right? And so the way she invested in the vision was by not giving up her seat. But, even when I interviewed with her, she was very honest. She said that was an impromptu decision. Just in that moment, I wanted people to know that this wasn't right. And that's why she didn't give up her seat. But what truly showed her investing in the vision was the fact that she was one of the 4 plaintiffs in Broder versus Gale, which was the Supreme Court case that overturned segregation on buses. And it was, a monumental case that made change and was a big piece of the civil rights movement. What was, even more of an investment in the vision from my perspective was that, this was 9 months before Rosa Parks. And yet she never became the icon of the civil rights movement, right? And even that was vision driven, because when I asked her about it, she explained to me why Rosa Parks had to be that civil rights movement icon, because Rosa Parks was accepted by both Blacks and whites alike. She was from an upper middle class family, whereas Claudette Colvin was seen as this rebel teenager from a lower socioeconomic status. And so Rosa Parks really was the icon who could take the spark and make it, into a flame. And so, what truly was so meaningful for me, and this was like my dream come true, is Claudette Colvin holding a copy of Radical Product Thinking, and just, this sharing in this view that we can really systematically create change in the world. So that is my message for you. We can really systematically create change in the world by thinking through vision, strategy, priorities, execution and measurement in your culture, and bring people with us on the journey. And this means that, you know, we don't have to rely on just a few rare leaders, which is where I started, right? You don't have to rely on just the Steve Jobs and Elon Musk creating change in the world. Every one of us can create vision-driven products to bring about the change we want to see in the world. And so Radical Product Thinking is in bookstores. You can also get the free toolkit from radicalproduct.com. And please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Radhika. Thank you so much for this so inspiring and strong presentation. Congratulations. So I think we all should clap a little bit, maybe virtually. Thank you.
Thank you.
So who would you say the book is aiming to, and how would you like the readers to, you know, what would you like the readers to get out of the book when you're reading? Are you aiming any specific target audience, more or is it a broad message that anyone can really take stock from?
Yeah, you know, even in writing the book, I really applied these same ideas of radical product thinking, which is, what is my vision, right? And that meant answering this question of whose world am I trying to change? Like, who's the target reader of this? And for me, the target reader is the professional who has experienced product diseases, who identifies with the fact that, you know, we cannot keep doing what we're doing today, who can really identify with that and therefore want to do something differently, and just need the step-by-step approach to be able to create vision-driven change. So that's my target audience. But you know, my main goal in terms of what is that takeaway? That takeaway is the same one from the presentation. That's what I hope people get. That's what I hope people get from the book, which is that every one of us can be vision-driven in creating change, you know, wherever we want to create change, whether it's through our work, personal lives, our startup, anywhere. That's the first thing, right? That we can be vision-driven. And the second thing is that I hope all of us can really see that we're building products. We're building products that affect people's lives. And therefore, you know, it's not just that by being vision-driven, we can build successful products. It's also that we can build products that affect society in a way that doesn't create collateral damage.
Yeah. So nowadays, of course, there's lots of people talking about product-led companies and product-led growth. Does it make sense to talk about vision-driven companies instead?
Absolutely. You know, for me, this term of product-led, I've always interpreted that as being vision-driven, but I do feel like we can just be very explicit about it. Because, you know, to me, product is our mechanism for creating change. We really need to be led by what is that change that we want to bring about in the world. And that really forms that foundation for what product do we even build.
Yeah, that leads me to one of the questions that I was, you know, comes crossing my mind when I'm reading the book, which is, why do you think we still see so much, you know, we live in a world where I guess that's just my personal take on that, but I guess the majority of the companies we deal on and products, they don't seem to be vision driven, right? They don't seem to appeal to this higher. And why do you think that still happens? I mean, we have the tools now, we have the book, we have the playbook, that the gospel has been out there for a while. Why do you think that we still see so many visionless companies and organizations?
You know, I think the gospel has been there in terms of we have to be product-led organizations or that we have to have a vision, right? But the reality is what we've learned about what a good vision means, I feel that has been really flawed, right? For the longest time, we've touted visions like, being number one or number two in every industry. That was GE's vision. We've touted that as, being a good vision. We've always learned that your vision has to be broad, right? And that's kind of one of the fundamental problems. So that's the first piece of it. But the second piece, and what this leads to, right, is when your vision is so broad and it's not a clear purpose that comes into everyday focus, what ends up driving what we're doing is just all the short-term business needs. Short-term business needs are what are most urgent and, most top of mind. And so the problem with that approach is then we become increasingly short-term focused. And by the way, there's research that shows that we have been increasingly short-term driven since the 1980s. That's the other trend that has happened since the 70s even. It was basically the trend of this shareholder capitalism where the only goal of a company is to show returns to shareholders. And so that has constantly driven this short-term need. And so that leads us to just not be vision driven, but continuously iterate and always milk the cow wherever we need to be able to show those short-term results, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think now we're starting to think about, well, maybe this shareholder capitalism is not the right model. We should move towards stakeholder capitalism. We're starting to have those thoughts, but in terms of a very clear methodology for what does stakeholder capitalism mean? How can you actually apply that in building your company? That has been missing. And I feel like this is the first time we're actually talking about that in terms of the step-by-step methodology.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very recent gospel in that way. I think Arshnur, she has a question here about fast-changing market needs dictating vision changes. Arshnur, do you want to jump in and do the question yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hope my voice is audible.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the market needs change at an exorbitant speed because of the changing consumer needs. And I think the recent Black Swan event is a testimony to that. So what to do under these circumstances? How as a CEO can I, not impact my people who have built that product, and plus also take care of the profit holders, right? All the people who are funding the company. I think that's the main question.
Yeah, and I think there are two parts to this question, right? So one is the how do you deal with this fast-changing market? And very often we think like, oh, vision, strategy, all of this takes time. Sometimes you just need to act. And I feel like this is such a myth because in just acting fast, it gives us the satisfaction that we're doing something. But very often, we might be on a galloping horse, even if it's going in the wrong direction, right? And so even when you have a company and you need to move fast, talking about the vision and strategy doesn't take long. You can have a whole visioning session, and this is what I do when I facilitate sessions. You can have a whole visioning session in 1 hour. A strategy session will take another, hour and a half or so. But really, it doesn't take that long to think through what is it that we're doing. And the advantage of that is that we really bring our whole organization with us on the journey, as opposed to let's just do things. That's where we start moving in different directions. The second part of your question was, when you have this fast-changing market, how do you balance the profitability versus actually being more vision-driven? I think one of the key things in terms of a new mindset that we need to think about is, we don't necessarily have to trade off profitability with being vision-driven. We can be both, right? I think it's really this false dichotomy that we've created. we just have to sometimes be creative and recognize what we're doing if we are completely being irresponsible in terms of just optimizing for metrics and, oh, well, there's collateral damage to the world, but so what, right? I think if we stop thinking if we stop being okay with creating what I call digital pollution, then we can start to take responsibility. So, the vision versus survival that I talk about, the vision, very purposefully, it does not include business goals. Like you'll see in the vision statement, there's no place for, being a billion-dollar company in that radical vision worksheet. It's very purposefully out of the vision. The vision is really about the problem we want to solve. The survival, which is where you think about your short-term financial needs, that's where, you take that into account. So every time you're doing something in the world that is good for survival because it's going to make you lots of profits, but it's bad for vision, you're taking on vision debt. I think, at the moment, you're seeing this great resignation is what everyone's calling it, where, there are so many people quitting jobs. They feel like, I want to do something meaningful. The more vision debt we're taking on, the more work just feels less purposeful. We don't always have to keep on taking vision debt, and we have to kind of recognize when we're doing that and sometimes invest in the vision. And I'm not saying you can never take vision debt, like that would be impractical. But I think the main problem is we don't even recognize that we're taking on vision debt.
Yeah. I think Monica, she also had a question. I don't know, Monica, if she wants to voice her question. Otherwise, I'll do one of my own, which is really to this mantra that we have been living as well for the, last 11, 12 years with the lean startup movement of trying something in the market to see if that works and iterate to achieve this product market fit nirvana. So could be, could be a key for a successful product. You think this, this is a gospel, right? This is true gospel in startup world for sure. Do you think this is still valid? And how do you conciliate this quantum physics with general relativity, which is, I guess, what you're trying to do here, right? So how do we, can we live with both and they have different applications? Or is this what you're saying is a little bit different, so we should kind of overcome this last phase that we have been living for the last decade or so?
Yeah, I think in the last decade or so, what has happened is we're really over relying on iteration, right? And this is not, to go back to the earlier point, it's not that iteration itself is bad. The problem is that we just iterate without a clear vision. So why has this idea become so popular? Like, why do we think that leads to success? I think a lot of that comes down to the VC business model. The VC model is, the way VC business model works is, they invest in 10 startups. Only one startup out of those 10 really needs to make it big. The rest can fail, right? And so the ideal model for a VC is fail fast, because this way I stop investing in the ones that are dying anyway. So try lots of things, find very quickly what is working, and then I'll invest lots in that one horse that is, coming first, right? So that's kind of been the VC model. And from this VC model, what's really been popularized is this idea that try lots of things, keep iterating, find what works, and that's going to be the successful one. But statistically, right, this is why 90% of organizations fail or startups fail. And, although we have all these new methodologies like Lean Startup, Agile, it hasn't fundamentally changed how many startups are successful from when they start off. And so the analogy I often like to give is when we're playing this statistical game, right, it's like licking trees and hoping to find maple syrup. So we can do that, and there are just a few startups that get lucky. They find maple syrup because they've licked the right tree, right? And then you end up with something like a Twitter or a Slack. They happen to pivot to exactly the right thing and they became successful. But for every company that does that, there's a graveyard of failures, but there's survivor bias. You only hear about Twitter and Slack that pivoted and then found success. You don't hear about the whole graveyard of failures. And so this approach is more about being more systematic about what we even try. Because the one thing that you don't hear about often is that as the reality is for a startup, every startup has 2 to 3 pivots before you run out of money or momentum, no matter how well funded it is. Like you literally have 2 to 3 pivots before it's like, this isn't really working. And you start, just seeing things dwindling down. So how do you save your pivots for just the most crucial? That requires being vision driven.
That's a strong message. Strong claim as well. And I guess one of the things that's in your book, and let me just read from one of these passages, page 48. So you said, if your vision is about your business goals, you're less focused on solving the customer's problem and are creating an opportunity for a competitor with a clearer focus on the customer's problem to beat you at your game. So why do you think so many companies, even well-funded startups, still suffer from the Narcissus complex? Because this is so insightful, right? Because what you're actually doing is giving someone with a better vision the edge. So vision becomes a competitive advantage at the end of the day, right?
So true. And I love how you phrased it, right? I think there are 2 reasons why narcissist complex is so common, even in well-funded startups. The first one is, an issue that I personally ran into, right? Which is when you're a founder, you are so passionate, you really believe in this idea, you feel like you've experienced the problem and you want to solve it. And so you're very focused on this internal desire to solve to scratch your own itch, let's say. And that makes you think that if I just build these features, others will come. And it's really hard to hear that. It's hard to listen and say, maybe that's not what other people really want. So that's the first reason for a narcissist complex, that where, having this clear vision and being able to have a strategy where you're focusing on the pain point, validating that pain point, all of that becomes an advantage. The second reason, right, for narcissist complex is the other piece that we're taught, which is that we often feel like that you have to kind of get that external validation. You have to be that billion-dollar company. This is a little bit of hero syndrome as well, but the narcissist complex is what makes you feel like if I just do this, I can be, big. It's one of those reasons where, because of narcissist complex, we feel like we're just focusing on our own goals of being big, what we want for the organization, our aspirations, etc. And that means, instead of focusing on the customer problem, we focus on those short-term needs to be able to raise lots of money, what we think success looks like.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think will be crucial for this, new generation of product managers to be more vision driven?
As a product manager, what makes work much more meaningful and satisfying, right, is to feel like your everyday work has meaning, that your decisions, the features that you're building, all of that is driven by a vision. So very often what I find is product people, their role originally was supposed to be strategic, but what ends up being is it becomes a very tactical role. You become the backlog administrator instead of being that strategic thinker. And so for this next generation of product people, right, instead of being relegated to this role of just tactics, the way you can really bring in or usurp a more strategic role is by having your own clarity of vision, having a strategy for yourself. Even if the rest of your organization if you feel like, well, it's hard for me to push through this vision, etc., having one for yourself is the first start, because that'll make you feel like your own actions are more meaningful. And that start, you then start at a grassroots level to sort of push your vision upwards. And so this approach helps you do that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of goes here towards Monica's question, which was a little bit about that, which is, sometimes individually you might want to create change, you might want to see the change, but you'll have people or management or top management stopping you to perform on that vision. I don't know, Monica, do you want to phrase this yourself, or is this what you were asking?
Oh, I think I don't see Monica right now.
Yeah, she's here. Maybe she's muted, but okay, let's just assume this is the question. Which from what I understood is, what do you do if you, how do you sell the vision upwards, right? How do you go and you up manage vision, which I guess is the situation that lots of us as product managers are. We're not, we're not the CEO, you're not the, chief product officer. You don't feel that you have the constituency to, hold the vision as an employee. So how do you do that really? Is it that grassroots movements that you were speaking about?
Exactly. So the way I have done this, right, is exactly as you say, at a grassroots level with your own product team, just with your own product team, work on this vision exercise as a team. And that's the starting point. Once as a team, you have a shared vision, then as you start your sprint planning and you plan, what features you're going to build, start to use the vision versus survival to be able to plan out what features. When you're using this for sprint planning, you'll take more features from the ideal quadrant. You'll take, a couple of features maybe from the investing in the vision quadrant, and you'll mostly try to avoid vision debt, but, sometimes maybe you have to take on some vision debt, but talk about what features you're taking on from each of these quadrants and you plan that into your sprint. Now, once you get this kind of familiarity with this at a grassroots level, now when you talk to stakeholders, you start to use this vision versus survival to communicate upwards, to say, here is why we are going to do this feature, or here's why we are pushing back on this feature. And so naturally the conversation that comes up is, well, what's your x-axis? What's your y-axis? And you have that conversation. And this is where, you start talking about what exactly is that vision, and you share, oh, here's our detailed vision. And the moment you share it in that whole fill in the blank statement, the thing is, it becomes this API almost for communication, not just across your team, but also with other teams. And it prompts kind of the right sort of questions. It's not a slogan, but it's very understandable kind of across the whole organization. Oh, I see exactly what your vision is. If there's disagreement, you can start to talk about that. But this is kind of the grassroots level where you start with your team and then you start to communicate upwards. And it kind of forces that discussion about what is that vision? Why did you make this decision? But this way, right, it helps prompt those discussions to be a little more objective. It's not just about, oh, we don't want to do this feature, we're pushing back because we don't think it's a good idea. It makes it more objective. Well, we think it's a good vision fit or not. Here's why it's helping us survive or not.
And last question, maybe at least from my side, how do you avoid vision depth in an organization, right? And do you propose in your book or elsewhere any kind of metric to measure vision depth, to quantify this to a certain level? It's, product managers are quantic freaks, right? They're always trying to measure everything. So very metric driven. And I guess people should ask you, okay, how do I measure my vision depth? Is there a non-subjective way to do this?
That's a great question. But I think of vision debt kind of like technical debt, right? When you take on technical debt, it makes your product or your code more brittle. When you take on vision debt, you're just going further away from your vision. And in some ways, vision debt is more painful than technical debt, because technical debt you can fix. Vision debt, it's hard to fire your customers. So once you've taken on vision debt, it's really hard to kind of overcome that. But to your point, right, like, how do you measure it? do we end up measuring technical debt as much? Not really, right? It's more that we acknowledge something is technical debt or not. And so it's more like it's something similar with vision debt, where you're keeping track of how often are you taking on vision debt. Just the very fact that you start to acknowledge it helps you see kind of, if you're feeling demotivated as a team and you have 5 things in vision debt that you've just taken on, it helps you exactly see why. Sometimes just listing those things as vision debt in that in the quadrants helps you see the amount of vision debt you're taking on. So more than quantifying it, I feel like it helps you create alignment in terms of feeling like, are we taking on too much vision debt? And it prompts that conversation. Every time you take on vision debt, well, guys, when are we ever going to invest in the vision, right? We're just continuing to take on vision debt. And one last thing, right, is the advantage of acknowledging, just talking about vision debt is the fact that when you're taking on, the fact that you're saying this is vision debt means that it's not just a loss of confidence in the vision. It's not the management saying the vision is not important. They recognize that, look, this is not a good thing, but here's why we're doing it. And it's that communication that I care about the vision, but here's unfortunately why we're doing this. That is super helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if you're able to voice your, being honest with the team, right? Because people are not stupid. They know that sometimes you have to do some sacrifices towards vision, towards the vision. So you have to take vision debt. But if you voice it and you explain the rationale, that makes the conversation much more humble and candid. So yeah, I mean, if anyone has any question, by all means, feel free to do it. I'm just going to share here the screen. So this is actually a Q&A moment. And Paulo, you have a question? Go on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Radhika, for your excellent presentation.
Sorry to interrupt. Let me just say, if you don't mind, just going to this feedback form in the meantime, while we're still doing some Q&A, because this might take 1 or 2 minutes. And this is the feedback form that gives you access to the raffle. So we want you to give this amazing opportunity to have a one-on-one session with our special guest today, Radhika. And by answering the form, we'll have your data and you'll get into the raffle, the Wheel of Fortune that we'll do today. So make sure that you register by answering the feedback form, and we'll be doing the raffle just after the Q&A. Paulo, sorry for the interruption.
It's okay. It's okay. I was thank you, Productized and Radhika, for this excellent presentation. So my question is about vision. So in large companies, the company has a vision, sometimes not very clear. It's focused into $1 billion or 1 billion clients, conquer the world. Then you have 10 products with different visions. How the hell do you align all these all these visions?
Great question, right? Especially in bigger companies, the way you can start this process is, first of all, for every product, have a vision for that particular product. And then, presumably you have a hierarchy of product people in the organization. And so, each portfolio manager will then have a vision and has the responsibility to look across all of these product vision statements and say, are these product visions aligned? Where is their overlap, etc. It's a way that you can use also to do some product rationalization. Very often I'm asked, well, but if you have a product vision for each of these products, aren't these vision statements very similar? They can be, right? And that's okay. But when you're answering the who, what, why, when, how questions, there may be some answers that are exactly the same. Some answers might be different. And so when every product team has the same format of a vision statement, that's where it acts like an API. I understand now what you guys are doing, and vice versa. It becomes easier to kind of align all these vision statements as a company and kind of cascade it upwards. And then, finally, I also suggest at a leadership level, going through a vision statement and talking about, what is our vision for the company in a very similar format. So yeah, basically cascading this vision all the way so that every product team has it.
Do you have a framework for doing that, for helping us to do that?
I haven't written a book on it yet. It's more just experience. Maybe that's the next thing to do, a book on that.
Or a workshop.
Thank you.
If you want to prototype that framework with us. All right. Any other questions? You still have Radhika, can you still take my? Oh, okay. We have pre-order for your upcoming book already from Hahoa. Hi. How do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Any question there?
Yeah, no, I think that's what the theme that I'm hearing from a couple of folks is operationalizing this, and I think what you said, André, upselling this process and vision. I think, as I do a lot of professional development and love a lot of these ideas, it's always in that execution up that's the challenge, and I think one of the things I think I agree with you, Radhika, just do it is a way, you have to do it and commit to it and learn how to do it is one of the coaching pieces that I've said. And so, but the more frameworks that are out there to do it successfully, I think I'm all ears on that, especially in large organizations and super hierarchical organizations, that it's a challenge.
Yeah, one of the examples that, I didn't really talk about that much in the book, but the experiences in terms of doing this, and especially in a large organization where, in a large organization, this requires a new way of thinking. It's not so much extra process. It's really a way of thinking, right? But anytime you create change is always hard. And the larger the organization, the more they're set in ways, because you need repeatability in how you're doing things. And so there's almost this organizational immunity to bringing in a new idea. It's a foreign body coming in, right? And so the way that I've found this to be easier to kind of push forward is start with one product team. And you start to apply this in a product team that is kind of hungrier than others. It's a newer product team. And you show some success with this approach. And then, you have to kind of get that buy-in, continue to show or do a lot of marketing for this product team and kind of how you've created change by taking on this new approach. That is one approach. The second thing that I've done in organizations is doing a book club. Again, in larger organizations, there has to be a really clear reason for why are we creating change, because otherwise, just change is hard. So a book club is a good starting point where you talk openly about product diseases, where you see examples of tons of other companies who have faced product diseases. And so, talking openly about what product diseases are we seeing? And therefore, what are we going to do about those product diseases? And that's a way of starting to get buy-in to be able to implement those changes. But that's the difference between larger companies and startups. In a startup, the founder can just kind of steamroll things and say, we're applying this approach, that's it. In larger companies, it takes more of this buy-in and communication. And it starts with, why is the status quo unacceptable? And having a clear answer to that so that there is a desire to adopt a new approach.
All right. So let me just tell this little story that you were telling me about. Why not an audiobook? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, so there is an audiobook. There is the print audiobook plus the ebook on Amazon. But the reason I've not narrated the audiobook, although, I love giving talks, etc. It goes back to the example I gave with Claudette Colvin and the story I told there. She really inspired me in wanting to create change. One of the things about this book, by the way, is that I share a global perspective in terms of showing products around the world that change the world. It's not a Silicon Valley perspective. I really wanted to make sure that we were representing kind of other parts of the world as well. And you'll see, as in the presentation, it's not just about these rare white male leaders who are able to create change. The examples I gave were of women of all sorts, all colors, right? So the point about the audiobook was I realized that if I were narrating this audiobook, I would be, a woman of color who is talking about diversity in the book, but is also narrating the book. And I really wanted to make sure that, there's this cognitive bias that we have where if we are listening to someone who happens to be a white male, there's research that shows that that person ends up being heard. And so the reason my audiobook, it was a vision-driven choice. Like, my strategy is that I want to make sure everyone really hears and listens to this perspective that is a more global perspective. And the strategy was to have a narrator who is a British male voice that is talking about diversity. And that was a very important, angle or a message that, every one of us should be talking about diversity and the importance of having these very varied examples and of visionaries from around the world, and making sure that that view is heard.
All right, understood. And sorry, I meant, why not an audiobook narrated by yourself? And we have, we now know why. So I'm just going to do the raffle that has been promised with the people have answered the feedback form. And let's see what this is going to hold. So I'm going to press somewhere like here. There's this is so funny. Your face is in the middle. Okay, so congratulations, Ahoa. Yeah, congratulations. Ahoa Hamano, you are the winner of this 101 with Radhika. So what is going to happen is we're going to send you Radhika's Calendly URL, and then you can book directly with Radhika. Yeah, great. So this is it, guys. Thank you so much for your time. It has been amazing, and thank you so much, Radhika, for the opportunity to have this launch at our not book club but Productized podcast. This is also going to be published in a podcast format. If you're interested, you can find everything at this link tree where you have links to the podcast, to the YouTube channel, to our social media, and of course very, very soon, I guess tomorrow, to the audio podcast on our podcasts at the usual platforms. So guys, thank you so much, and see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure.
One final request, Radhika, for everyone. If you have your book with you, and I know that Arshnur, she does, because I've seen her, let's just do a group picture with the book.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah, and then yeah, I know you have a frozen camera. Don't worry, Radhika. It will look like a cat. Okay, now it's great.
Okay.
Paulo, you have your book with you? Teresa, just unplug your. Okay, great. All right, so we have Nuno and João. Paulo, book with you? No book with you? All right, let's just do the ones with the book. Teresa, mais para cima. Okay, so who's doing the print screen? You are? Yeah, designer. Okay, Nuno, shame on you, no book. And Mihai took his book to the Canary Island. That's the way to go, because I know that you are from Romania, so you took the book to read it on holiday. Great, that's good to hear. 1, 2, 3. All right. Okay, we have we have the group picture. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day, and see you very soon on our next episode next week. So, Radhika, thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. This was lovely.